We are live. Welcome back, everybody, to another live networking event here on the 17th floor. For those of you that are new, watching for the first time, or listening live for the first time, just as a reminder, the 17th floor is an online community that is focused on the growing practice of human capital management, which gathers HR, accounting, and payroll professionals together for peer to peer engagement, education, and mentorship. Every couple of weeks here on the community, we host one of these live networking chats featuring subject matter experts, our guests, in which we here and our members, you, uh, can chat about our experiences in uplifting businesses by elevating the well being of our employees. My name is Sam Fiorella. I'm a member here of the 17th Floor Community Management Team, and I'll be acting as your moderator once again today. So, in talking to today's special guest, I heard the following sentiment when we were chatting last week, which I thought was really powerful to me as somebody who does the hiring for my company. And I wanted to kind of set this out as the framework for what we're going to be talking about. And he said that there's a lot of disengaged people, or that the trends right now are showing that there are more and more disengaged people are showing up to work. Yet we have millions of jobs that are not filled because we don't seem to have the people to fill them. So, and as employers, myself, hiring managers, some of which, like me, are both, the numbers don't seem to really be in our favor. So today I want to talk about how we increase our talent pool to expand that audience, and possibly find people that maybe we would never have previously considered, or maybe that would never have considered working with us. But of course, to do that, one of the first solutions we always go to is like, okay, what's the technology solution? What service do I use? What tech do I need to use? And there's, of course, this growing trend or term, people technology, and how are we using it in modern businesses? And so we thought, who better to ask than Jan Vanderhoop to join us today. Jan is the president and co-founder of Fit First Technologies, a company that I've used in the past with great success. And this company has revolutionized how people and organizations come together to create value. He's been instrumental in helping clients across North America reduce turnover, increase efficiencies, and generate the elusive ROI of more than 300% in 1 year in some cases, all through better people practices. Notice I didn't say people technology, but people practices. So his views have been featured in media across the country, so many of you are probably quite familiar with him. So welcome, Jan. I'm glad that you were able to join
Thanks.
us today.
Well, and if I can, just for a second before we get going, it occurred to me as you were doing the introduction, Sam, I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate you and your team for what you've built in 17th Floor, because it kind of is an HR technology, and it is an HR technology that improves lives, improves connections, allows for networking, builds a community. That to me is a great application for tech.
Well, that is kind of what we're trying to do here. So that's wonderful. Thanks. I appreciate hearing that. Before I start into the questions, though, I want to make sure that everybody who's watching live knows, feel free to ask any questions or comment. We are doing this live on YouTube as well as LinkedIn. So if you are watching live, please feel free to drop in a question and we'll try and get to it throughout the course of the session. If you're watching this as a replay or hearing it on the podcast later, leave a comment or a question in the comments below, or reach out to myself or Jan directly through our profile here on the 17th floor. All right, so let's just jump into it. Jan, we know that we talked about technology and we talked about the use of people technology. I know you're heading to a big show on this subject
On
next week.
Sunday. Sunday,
I think
yeah.
it is. What's the show that you're going to?
It's the HR Technology Show, which is an enormous show. It's in Vegas. Our first time there was in 2019. Of course, there was a hiatus through COVID, but I was down there in 2019 as an observer, as a participant, just to sort of check it out, and was really impressed with the quality of the presentations that were there. What I really liked was it was real people in real jobs talking about the upsides and downsides of technology and integrating it into systems and what have you. But what really blew me away was the expanse, the vast expanse of the trade floor, and all the different technologies that were coming to market. Many of them mature, many of them completely speculative. And so we've made the decision to go back this year as exhibitors, sort of to present what we're doing to that community. And so we're there through Thursday night next week, and then coming back. But it's funny. I mean, obviously, any conference that has any sophistication at all is going to be sending teasers out to people, and they create opportunities for vendors to invite people to their booths. And the timing of this couldn't be better, Sam, because the question that you posed to me a while back around what's the role of technology, I've been holding that up in the background as I've been getting this series of emails from different vendors, and and a bunch of them are presenting technologies that clearly are not what I would call great HR tech. So one of them is an onboarding platform that is designed to build engagement through fun and games and scavenger hunts and all the rest of that stuff. And sure, I can understand how that sales pitch might go. The other one is, when we were down at the SHRM show in New Orleans a few months back, the pet insurance was all the rage as a new benefit for folks. Now that's evolved to technology that will actually allow you from your iPhone to turn on a camera at your house, so you can see Rover or Fifi at home when you've been called in. So you could be sitting at this really important all hands meeting at the office that everybody's been called in for, and actually be communicating with your pet. Again, so if we're to hold, both of those, I think, are good examples of tech that probably made sense to somebody at the time, and it sounded like fun to try to build it. But if you hold it up against the test of, is it going to change somebody's life for the better, and is it going to make a meaningful contribution to the company's P&L? I don't see it in those cases, right? And for me, I think those are the more important tests, the lenses for us to be looking at technology through. Because if it's not making somebody's life better, what's the point?
Are you anticipating finding a lot of those what might be considered useless technologies at this show? Are we starting to develop technology just for the sake of it?
Oh, we've been acting like a herd of cattle chasing shiny bling for decades. And frankly, the consulting companies have been really good at packaging up yesterday's product with new language and making it look shiny again. I mean, at the end of the day, here's the thing. I've had a really non-linear, non-traditional career, right? I started in operations, accidentally ended up in HR, ended up spending just over 15 years in a variety of senior level corporate HR positions in some very cool organizations that had, what I would call leading practices on the people side. So I learned in some pretty good places, but was always the oddball because I thought like an operator in the HR world. And I can remember my very first internship wasn't even called HR then. It was a personnel and training department at the Hilton Harbor Castle Hotel. I can remember reading journals, HR journals at the time. And you know what? Honestly, if I were to bring any of the articles from 1989, that summer that I spent in HR, into today's world, they would be current and relevant, because at that point we were still trying to fix turnover, we were trying to find people, we were trying, all of the things that are front and center as our pain points in organizations today were so 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've come up with all this magnificent tech supposedly to solve those problems, but we don't have a lot to show for it in many cases.
Well, can I remind you of something?
Sure.
You're the president of an HR tech company.
Accidental, yes. So I left the corporate world and started consulting, ran into clients who were having all kinds of pain on the people side of their business. Got together with the guy who ended up co-founding this business with me 16 or so years ago. And we really started to pick away at the problem. And the challenge that I had was, as we were going into these organizations and having had conversations with them about what wasn't working for them on the people side of the business, as we looked at their selection and hiring and onboarding process, and if I'd gone into those conversations with any of the list of best practices from Hilton International Hotels or PepsiCo or Office Depot, those three corporations that I'd worked at, we'd have been able to tick all of those boxes. So they were doing all of these best practices flawlessly. And yet at the end of the day, every one of them had retention issues. Every one of them had productivity problems. Every one of them had challenges priming the pump, so to speak. So, not having great success bringing people into entry-level positions and moving them up through the organization over time. And so, as we picked away at the problem, we looked at a lot of the research in the marketplace, some of it from Harvard Business Review, some of it from Gallup, which was work that I absolutely loved. So everything around that book that they published in the late 90s called First Break All the Rules. That should be a Bible for any HR department and any manager. And we can come back to that if you like. But, at the end of the day, we were really seeking to find out what it was that was missing in most organizations' selection practices. And we tripped across an academic study that came out of the UK, which has since been validated in other settings. But what they said was, if you're really interested in the predictive value of the information that you can collect about somebody as you're taking them through the hiring process, you have to really measure the predictive value. And what they found was the predictive value of the items you'd find in the resume. So, somebody's educational level, where they went to school, what sort of training and certifications and credentials they've obtained, their previous working experience, the titles they've had, the employers they've had, the gaps in their employment, all of those things that we've come to rely on for decades as leading indicators, as the things that we lean into as a survival mechanism, honestly, because we've got to have some way of shortening the stack of resumes to something that's manageable. And so we make up rules about which resumes we're going to look at first and which ones we're going to ignore. What they found in these studies is the elements in the resume, even though sometimes they might be a bona fide qualifier or disqualifier, so you need to have a credential for certain jobs, that's non-negotiable. But by and large, the predictive value of those elements is very, very weak. So we rely on the resume to help us decide who we're going to pay attention to. And yet, when you look at the correlation, the predictive correlation between that information and how long somebody's going to stay and how well they're going to perform, extraordinarily weak.
So is that the reason, like earlier, we were talking about that there's so many people disengaged, in the organization, which is one problem. But the second problem is that we just don't seem to be able to find enough people. Is it that there isn't enough people, or that we're simply relying on the wrong tools to establish the audience that we can pull from?
Yeah, I think both are true. I think if you look at demographics, Sam, it's come home to roost. I mean, we've known for decades that we haven't been having enough babies and we haven't been bringing enough people from overseas. And so, what COVID did, if anything, was accelerate retirement plans for a lot of people. So there are people no longer in the workforce, and that is a major issue. I think the corollary that you put your finger on is we haven't been doing a really good job of managing the resource that we have available. And it's interesting because I was thinking about this morning, and thinking about all of the droughts that we're experiencing in the prairie provinces and then the west coast of the US. I mean, we've not really given much more than lip service to water management. And the time has come where, as a community of stakeholders, we are going to need to be very deliberate, very thoughtful, and very deliberate about where every drop of water is going to go. And in many cases, it's exactly the same with talent management. There are a finite number of people in any community that employers have to draw from. Historically, we've done a really bad job of matching in aggregate, a really bad job of matching talent with opportunity, and often employing people in jobs that they can do, but they're not really well suited to do, which leads to a productivity issue, which leads to a flight risk, which leads to disengagement. All of these things that we're talking about are symptoms of a bigger problem, I
Is
think. And
disengagement a byproduct of that poor hiring practice or inaccurate use of
I think I think
technologies?
I think it's part of it, Sam. I think, I've been in lots of jobs that I have the know-how to do, but that I've never really felt connected to.
So feeling connected to, that's something, quite frankly, that, in using your company and using your services in the past that you've taught me. We now make it a practice to not hire based on resume,
Hmm.
but based on fit. And, however, whatever technology or, human intuition you want to use, questioning practices you want to use to figure that out. I think it was you that said aptitude is evenly distributed, opportunity is not. Um,
It was actually one of our clients.
Oh, perfect. It's one of your clients. I mean, and that really resonated with me. And this is why I'm thinking when it comes to, because we are here about, this community is about human capital management,
Hmm.
right? And so how do we manage people uh, in the job and outside of the job and encourage them so that they deliver the best for the business? Not only are they happy and having better lives, and what's our responsibility to delivering that infrastructure for them?
Yeah.
But that extends to the hiring practice. It must extend to the hiring practice because in order for us to, it doesn't matter what policies we put in place or what pet insurance we give them or don't give them. If they're not going to be happy with that or with whatever our policies are, regardless of how good they are at that job, it's not going to work.
Right.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do we identify people? Like what, tell me, like this maybe explain to me the concept of hiring for fit versus hiring for skill.
So, um, I mentioned earlier on. Oh, I muted everything except one phone. There we go. Sorry about that. Um, I think we've been very well attuned to screening people based on the pedigree,
Mm-hmm.
and what we've done instead. So the quick shorthand. If we were to just, if I had 2 floors going up in an elevator with somebody and they asked me to describe in a short sentence what's different about our approach, it's instead of driving you to what supposedly are the right resumes in the pile, our objective instead is to drive you to the right people in the applicant pool. Let's help you find people who are naturally going to be better suited to the reality that's waiting for them in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so to do that, we lean heavily into some pretty sophisticated behavioral job matching technology that we've created and evolved over the years. But that quote from the client is one that I've repeated very often because it is absolutely brilliant, and it was an epiphany that they came to. They said, what we've discovered here, because we've gone from a scarcity situation. So this client is in the skilled trades.
Mm-hmm.
And they created a not-for-profit that was specifically designed to attract more people into the skilled trades because they've been screaming for people for years. I mean, we've been retiring more people than we've been graduating into the trades by a factor of 10 for decades
Mm-hmm.
now. And nothing had worked previously. So rather than following the traditional screening and selection process, they decided to lead with the technology that is, as Stephen, our client said, when we get people and the resume out of the first step of the selection process, and you just allow the algorithms to impartially work their way through the applicant pool and help you find people who are naturally well suited to the job and to the reality that's waiting for them, you can't help but end up with a more diverse group of candidates to look at. And so, initially to satisfy the requirements of the grants and other programs that they leaned into to get this thing kickstarted, they had to set some targets to bring in more women, more newcomers, more visible minorities, more Indigenous, and more people with disabilities. And I can still remember breakfast with Stephen sort of somewhere between 6 and 10 months in to our work together. We've been doing this now for almost 4 years, but it was still early days. And he said to me, we've been so busy getting this program up and running that we haven't had the opportunity yet to do any really meaningful outreach to those communities. And what we discovered is, in spite of ourselves, 24% of the people we've already hired as apprentices tick at least one of those 5 boxes. So, you know, his comment was about letting the algorithms do the work. It was a different client who coined the phrase, you know, what we've learned is aptitude is evenly distributed in the population, opportunity is not. And their reference was, you know, when you think about what's in a resume, it's nothing more than a reflection of the opportunity somebody's had up until now in terms of access to education, access to skills development, access to mentors who can guide and steer and direct and push them when they need to be pushed. And for people who are in communities that have faced barriers, that's a double whammy, because they haven't typically had access to those networks and those other resources, which serves as a disadvantage to them. The other piece that's much more insidious, Sam, for me, and our nose has been in it for the last 2 years that we've been doing this work with specific organizations. But when you think about what's in the resume of somebody who has typically, you know, faced barriers to employment, they can't hope to have the magic combination of keywords and phrases that employers' applicant tracking systems are looking for. So it truly doesn't matter how many times they apply to work online with organizations, they will always be invisible.
Right. And so does technology fix that? Is there another way? How do we, so knowing this, how do the hiring managers, how do the payroll, human resource, whoever is like responsible for this in the organizations that are listening to us right now, how do they tackle that? How do they beat that?
I think for me, and for, you know, if you were to ask our clients the same question, they would say the answer, at least in part, is in using different glasses. So taking off the glasses that we've been using to read resumes and putting on glasses that can help you see the latent potential in people and their likelihood of fit in the reality that's waiting for them. Because we know, I mean, we've been doing this for 15 years. Our clients will tell you stories about, you know, what's different when they bring in somebody who's a really strong fit for the job. They're going to onboard faster. They're going to stay longer. They're going to treat your customers better. They're going to engage with one another better. So it's going to take friction out of the organization, and your results are going to improve.
Is that a solution that can be, or I guess something that can be done with technology? Where does we draw the line between where technology and people like work together? Like, is this intuition, or can technology truly identify those people?
The tech can show you those with the highest likelihood of success. How's that? That's you know, no technology is an infallible crystal ball. So for us with our clients, it's about shortening the amount of time that it takes for them to get to people who are likelier to work out really well. So for me, the full answer to your question is, you know, if you somehow I thought we'd be coming back to this Gallup work. I mean, back in late 90s, early 2000s, Gallup really pioneered this whole thing around engagement. But that wasn't their intention originally, right? When they wrote the book First Break All the Rules, it was really about understanding what it was that great managers do differently from garden variety managers. So how do they inspire? How do they instill an ethic in their work team that has them constantly overproduce their peer teams in the same organization?
Mm-hmm.
And so through all of their data crunching, Gallup came up with what they called the Q12. So a set of 12 questions that are really, you know, according to them, the statistically most valid predictors of an engaged workforce. And when you look at those 12 questions, you know, they speak to some aspect of relationship, right? So, you know, it's about a quarter. So a quarter of them would speak to the relationship that the individual has with their manager, because that is the single most important relationship in anybody's work life. The next quarter would focus on the relationship or the fit that the employee has with not only the job, but how it's done around here. The next is, you know, speaks to the social fabric in the organization. So what's the person's fit, or what sort of relationship and shared standards do they have with their coworkers? And then finally, it's fit with the organization, culture, values, what they stand for, all the rest of that stuff. How proud am I to tell my friends I come to work here every day? And Gallup positioned engagement as sort of the leading indicator, which was, for their purposes, made complete sense, right? Because the more engaged the team, the better the results were going to be in the organization. And in some cases, organizations have developed these really elaborate predictive models that led with team engagement, and they knew exactly how their P&Ls were going to look 6 months out based on upticks and downticks in employee engagement levels. But that's not the full story, because coming back to your question, engagement doesn't just happen, right? You got to set the stage for engagement to happen, and what we've been able to demonstrate in our work with clients is, first and foremost, you need to be bringing onto the team people who are more likely engageable in that reality, as we've already said, right? So it's people who are likelier to fit and stick and engage, but there's a catalyst that needs to be present in order for that to happen, and that's the manager.
Okay.
The manager needs to be adept at taking this person who's in an engageable state and converting that to engagement. And there's lots of ways for managers to do that. It's funny, I mean, in preparation for today, I thought I'd maybe come up with a Letterman top 10 list, but I couldn't come up with 10, so I came up with 3. So, the top 3 roles of HR tech for me, number 3 would be reducing friction, right? So reducing duplication of effort, reducing the risk of error, reducing the amount of work that is necessary in the system. Number 2 would be to improve, I put down the UX, the user experience, but it really is about improving lives. It's got to improve somebody's life. Ideally, it's going to improve everybody's life, all the stakeholders in this process, but somebody's life has to be made better or the tech's useless. And the third one for me, which is what brings me back to the Gallup thing, number 1 is it has to free managers up to manage. And there's a twist that I'll put on that, because I've got enough gray hair to have lived in different realities than most organizations have today. You and I lived through the restructurings and the downsizings of the 70s, 80s, 90s. Spans of control were widened. Managers more than ever became working managers. And when you look at what's broken and what's missing, and I think what lies at the heart of quiet quitting, disengagement, all of the things that we're lamenting in organizations, people are looking for relationships. That relationship with their manager is critical, and in many, many, many cases, we've starved managers of the ability to do what is most important in their job description, and that's to be the glue in the organization. It's to be the glue on their team that holds everybody together and keeps them focused. And so if technology isn't freeing them up to do that, it's a waste of time.
Now, I find that interesting. So, and it is true. Just, we all have too much to do. There doesn't seem to be enough hours in the course of the day. We're bogged down by technology as opposed to facilitating it or using it as a tool to facilitate that sort of thing. But are you suggesting that more managers today are managing tasks, managing jobs, managing the implementation of technology and processes and time cards and all that stuff, as opposed to managing people?
Yeah, absolutely. And it came. One of my first gigs when I left the corporate world and started out on my own in the early 90s, Sam, was with an organization that taught coaching skills to managers in organizations, and that's where it came face to face for me. I mean, I was working with some really talented people and really good leading organizations across North America, and there's no rocket science to teaching coaching skills. It's effective listening. It's asking the right questions. It's paying attention to performance, noticing when somebody's energy is up and down, and seeing if you can help them come to terms with it. There's an intimacy to that kind of relationship, that kind of conversation, that in many cases we've made impossible in organizations.
Do you think that the fact that the largest one of the largest cohorts in the workplace today are millennials, how is that impacting this
Ramps it up
relationship
even
building
more.
skill?
Ramps it up even more. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny. I won't mention the name of the organization, but it's a big insurance company in London. And this is probably almost 10 years ago. We sat down with the person who was their head of recruitment, and they hire a lot of part-time students from the universities. Actually, no, it was Waterloo, pardon me, not London. So from the universities around there, and and it was the beginning of the millennial curve, but it was exactly the same thing. And these are people that we know from research require care and feeding, require reassurance, thrive on attention, need time from their manager, and the actuaries in the organization were systematically widening the spans of control to make it absolutely impossible for a manager to actually spend any one-on-one time with their direct reports. I mean, they were expanding to something more than 30 in span of control. And that's a call center environment, right? And so, if we're really serious about fixing engagement, and if we're serious about being effective stewards of the limited talent resources that are available in the communities around us, we've got to get serious about how are we going to create relationships with the right people for whom we are right as well.
Are we starting to cross the line? Because I know, or where do we cross the line, and where is the risk in this? Again, as a manager, I've become, I guess, comfortable with or understanding that I need to be worried about my employees' mental health. We had our last webinar or chat was about caregivers and managing caregivers in the workplace, understanding that a lot of employees have to manage elderly parents, family members with disabilities, things that are going to take their attention away, and that we need to facilitate that for them. That we have to be ready to give them a work environment and hours in the day and flexibility to be able to have that part of their life. So you do get to know a lot about these people, but where, given the politically correctness that we're all going through as well, it seems to me this is some dangerous territory. As a manager, focusing on the people and what's going on in their lives and trying to improve all aspects of their life, that we start getting into some dangerous territory about potentially knowing too much or talking about things that are non-work related and become a little too personal. Is there a risk there?
Potentially.
How do we manage that?
But I think the risk is mitigated if there's a solid relationship of trust in place between the manager and the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've got employees also. I'm in Oakville. The rest of our crew's in Halifax. I've been working remotely since before it was cool to do so. And I would say that I've got a degree of intimacy with our team, which is healthy. I mean, we all have stuff going on in our lives. Sometimes it gets in the way of our ability to come to work with clear minds. And I think two things are true about that, Sam. One is I don't think twice about cutting them slack if they need to take some time to tend to something. And but that pays dividends for all of us. It pays dividends for us because they can go do what they need to do without losing any sleep over what the expectation is here. But I also know that they are going to perform they're going to overperform to make up for it. So there's a give and take there, right? I don't need to know the grisly details of what's happening in relationships and all the rest of that stuff. Sometimes they share just because they need to offload. Sometimes they don't. That's cool. It's none of my business. My business is to make sure that they're in a state of mind where they can come to work without feeling torn, and where they can be productive and focus on the most important thing, which is looking after their clients.
And I guess the final question I have on this is there tech that can help with non-workday employee engagement or behaviors? anything that you've come across? Because that's, we start getting into, hold on, now all of a sudden I'm spending so much time worrying about that kind of stuff. There's a tendency, well, what technology or what software can I use or what tools can I use to help me manage, for those of us that have to manage really large groups of people where those one-to-one conversations maybe can't be had all the time?
Sure. There's tech that can be used to help you manage your one-with-one process, to help you keep notes so that you can refresh your memory, to do all of those things. And there is no technology invented yet, and I doubt that there ever will be, that is going to replace the need for the human connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care whether, as a manager, you need to pull out a pad of paper, or you need to create paper files, or you need to have a CRM or something that allows you to keep your notes straight so you remember what conversation you had with somebody last month and what their targets were. But there's nothing that can replace the value of sitting down and having a conversation, human to human, the same way you and I are having, right? You can't technify that.
Yeah, agreed. So it's one thing to utilize technology to help point you in the right direction when you're hiring people, to find people who have the character and the aptitude to do a job, regardless of what's on their resume. It's then yet another to rely too heavily on that type of technology to manage that relationship once they've been hired.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when we're in the sales process with a prospect, we'll say, look, our stuff should never be more than a third of the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Companies are looking for crystal balls, right? They're saying, let the tech tell me who I should hire. No, no, I'll never do that, right? We can help you improve the odds. We can help you by providing an interview guide that's going to make sure that you're asking the right person exactly the right questions for them,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next person exactly the right questions for them, so that you as a manager can satisfy yourself whether or not you have what's necessary to make that person successful.
Right.
That's what it's all about. But then you've got to be that catalyst that converts the engageable state into an engaged outcome.
Yeah, and I think it's that engageable state that we really need to start looking at it, especially with this idea that we've been promoting so much here on the 17th floor, which is the growing your employees' well-being and supporting their lives in it to do a better job, and outside of the company to live better, is going to reap rewards for the company through them outperforming because they feel supported, because they don't feel threatened, because they don't feel judged, because they know that when they come in with a personal problem that you're going to relate. I really want to start breaking down, because there's no way that, and I don't think we're going to be able to do it on this call because our time is up here, but I'd like to, maybe whether it's with you or someone else, I want to start looking at where technology can support and where does it become problematic, right? And I think we need to take a look at different types of technologies, and that might be subject for a future
It'll
session.
Be a great conversation. I mean, there's tech out there that will supposedly tell you if somebody's a flight risk.
Yeah.
Still no substitute for a manager having a conversation with somebody and knowing firsthand whether their heart's in it or not.
Yeah,
they're really paying attention.
Culturally, think about what that means to an organization culturally. My head spins a little bit when I think about this. To shift you even as a C-suite, to be telling your managers, stop relying on so much technology, stop managing projects, start managing people. Rely on your underlings to manage the day-to-day, and the project managers to do that kind of stuff, the account managers do that kind of stuff. You just focus on the people.
It's
a
decade long the transition. I mean, for a company that's serious about doing that, it'll take a decade, because managers have lost the art of listening, observing, connecting. We've starved it out of their job generations of managers ago.
It's funny because this session started off, when we were planning it originally, was talking about people technology and what's the role of people technology and how do we leverage it. And
this is people technology. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah. Well, yes, having this conversation and just using technology to enable a conversation. And maybe that's how we should be defining people technology, not something that simplifies or automates communication, but facilitates that face-to-face.
Reduces friction, improves the user experience and frees managers up to manage.
Your top three.
There you
And
go.
again, you said earlier that in a previous conversation that I dated myself with a Gumby reference. You're dating yourself with a Letterman reference, but okay.
Yep.
I can appreciate that. Anyway, guys, we're out of time here today. Jan, thank you so much for this
That was
conversation.
fun.
I'm always
Thanks for having me.
so invigorated after talking to you. I really do enjoy our conversations, and I personally have been thrilled with the results of the technology that you have delivered in helping me to find people that are cultural fits with our company.
Yeah.
And I can tell you firsthand that the people that we've hired as a result of, you know, that I guess filtering of cultural fit has really reaped rewards. We have people still here that are doing well and in completely different jobs than what they were hired to do originally, just simply because they fit our company, our entrepreneurial spirit so well. So,
and it
if
shows
anybody,
up in your client relationships, and it shows up in your results.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And I had, well, the greatest compliment I had the other day, actually wasn't that long ago, I think about 2 weeks ago. Somebody was complimenting one of my employees on the job that they did when I was calling the client to check in. And they said, I could tell they were a Sensei employee. I could tell that they were a Sensei employee because there's a vibe that you guys have, which I thought was fantastic. And that is a lot in part by what you've taught me in terms of hiring people that fit our culture more than just hiring somebody who has the right, ticks off all the right things on a resume.
You can teach them what they need to know. That's easy.
Exactly. If they're smart enough and the aptitude is there, you can teach them. So if anybody wants to ask Jan any further questions on this, like I said, leave questions and comments below, and or follow him on the 17th floor. You can see his name, Jan Vanderhoop, which is in the profile section. If you go to our member directory, you'll be able to find him under our subject matter experts, or just by doing a general search. Feel free to reach out, ask any questions. Jan, I hope we can get you on a future episode.
It'd be my pleasure. I have to think of something else to talk about.
Yeah, remember, we do this every 2 weeks. If you want to find more on this subject here on the 17th floor, just do a search by HR or HR Tech. We're constantly adding not only these videos, but a lot of articles by our members. And then also check out the meeting rooms, our forums are buzzing with these types of conversations. Get together, talk to each other, help each other out, keep this conversation going. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.